Oh, brilliant. Well, first of all, thank you so much for joining us, especially for this Libraries Week chat. I have read Harrow Lake and it is brilliant.
Thank you.
Kept me up at night quite a bit. It's like, it's quite the character. But I figure before we get started, I don't know if you want to just tell us a bit about yourself.
Of course. Well, I'm from North Wales originally, still live in Prestatyn. Born and raised here. I've been writing books. My first one came out about 6 years ago now, and Harrow Lake is actually my 4th published book. I used to work for Denbighshire County Council, not in the library service, but yes, I am a former Denbighshire employee. I've been writing full-time for about 4 or 5 years, I think.
Nice, that's impressive. Fair play to you. I loved Harrow Lake, and it was so good. Like the atmosphere you created was just immense. It kind of reminded me a lot about Twin Peaks.
Yes, I love Twin Peaks.
Right from it. I absolutely love that show, even though it still gives me nightmares to this day.
Oh, I know.
But how did the concept for Harrow Lake originate, basically?
Well, I grew up a massive fan of all the big horror films of the 80s and 90s. My dad had this massive VHS collection of, like the big ones that launched in the 80s, like Halloween, Friday the 13th, all the real big ones. So I was quite small and I was watching these, like far too young to be watching them really. But yeah, I just grew up with that massive love of horror films. So I think that's always stayed with me, but I love reading horror books as well. So kind of blending the two different media together just seemed like a natural fit for me. And then I had the idea for Harrow Lake and just got to use all of that stuff that traumatized me when I was a kid.
Nice. I mean, I suppose it's quite hard to write as a horror in terms of creating that atmosphere. It's like, was that a sort of challenge for you, writing and creating that atmosphere that kind of sets readers on edge, I suppose?
Well, I would say Harrow Lake is my first sort of real step into more of the horror rather than thriller territory book-wise. And with my other books, I always begin with a sense of what the place, the setting is like. So building a world that is really going to be an immersive experience for a reader. That's something that I always try and make sure is right in any story. So whether it's something that's scary or not, you need to have something that really makes you feel like you're actually a part of the story. So that was something that has carried through from my other books into horror.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's one that what I really picked up on was just how brilliant your characterization of all these inanimate objects. Like, I mean, Harrow Lake itself, it just felt like such a character. It had such a dominating presence. It was just incredible, really. It was so good. Where did Harrow Lake, did you kind of start with like the church, or did it kind of just all come together collectively?
Well, the first idea that I had for it was the caves. I knew that I wanted to have, some real spooky scenes inside old, like mining tunnel caves. And living in Prestatyn at the moment, there are some old mining caves real close to where I live, the fish caves. So I've had a little look inside there. You can't really go very far because it's a bit dangerous. But yeah, I had some pictures of the insides of these caves, and I thought that's just like a perfect setting for some real spooky shenanigans to take place. So having that, I think, was probably my first like geographical thing that I wanted to put into the story. And yeah, it has, a church that has fallen into a sinkhole. It has the bone tree where kids hang their teeth so that Mr. Jitters won't come and get them. All sorts of, things like everywhere you turn, I wanted people to have something facing them that is a little bit weird. So that's where it sort of all came together.
Oh yeah, because it's the one that that freaked me out a bit. It was the fairground and like the electric fence. I just remember it was one scene where she kind of just pops up and it's just like, wait, is she seeing things or is that actually there? It all reminded me kind of, it was just like this brilliant collection of just because I'm quite a horror fan myself. So it was like, I kept thinking of Final Destination, it's like Twin Peaks and all that. And it was just it came together so well for you. But the characters themselves, they just came alive as well. And it was one thing that that struck me. It was a quote in the book about how in horror films, that you don't need monsters to create fear. And that really stuck with me because as a genre, do you think horror books offer kind of a greater freedom to explore the monsters like within ourselves and kind of each other?
Well, I think when you watch a horror film in particular, maybe more so than with horror books, when you watch a horror film, I think you go in with the expectation that there's going to be something monstrous that isn't human. So I kind of wanted to play with that idea, and you obviously in Harrow Lake you have Mr. Jitters, who is like a literal monster, but you also have the mirror to that, and that is the real darkness. You know, without giving away any spoilers here, but you know, the worst of the evil in Harrow Lake, I would say, is very human.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And it's because Lola herself was just such a character because she was quite an unreliable narrator in herself, which kind of it added to that suspense really, because you don't really know if what she's seeing kind of real or is she just kind of making it up. But I feel like a lot of it kind of stemmed from that because she's quite an isolated character. So how was that kind of influencing her actions and choices throughout the novel?
Yeah, I mean, she's grown up with a father who's very controlling, and he's kept her very isolated. She doesn't have any friends. She doesn't get to go out by herself. So you kind of have, you know, one idea in your head that, you know, she's the daughter of a famous film director. So obviously she's had this very glamorous upbringing, but the reality for Lola has been very different to that. She hasn't really seen much beyond her, you know, the four walls that she lives in. And the only real experience she has of the world is through books and through films, which, you know, she obviously just absorbs basically. And I think because fiction is the only way that she has to relate to, you know, people when she is in this real world setting, I think that kind of contributes to the fact that she isn't a very reliable narrator. So you always have to question what Lola is showing you because the narration is from her perspective. You know, is what's happening absolutely real? Is it in her head? Is it a combination of two, you know, a supernatural and, you know, a very human sort of sinisterness that's going throughout this town?
Oh yeah, definitely got that. And it's like so many of the other characters as well had such vibrant personalities, and each I feel like they all had their part to play in this tale as well in terms of Lola's growth and even in terms of this shaping of the events. Like Lorelai herself, even though she wasn't present, she had such a big influence on the events. And I feel like even Nightjar, is it Nightjar? Yeah, the film. I mean, it just had such a strong influence. It was almost like you had another plot running alongside Lola's journey, and the characters was just so fascinating. And then, do you ever feel like you could dip your toes back into the world of Harrow Lake and kind of do like a spin-off or a follow-up with one of the other characters?
To be honest, I wrote Harrow Lake with the intention of it being a standalone, but at the point where I'd pretty much finished editing the book, I thought a story thread did come to me that I thought, actually, if I wanted to go back to Harrow Lake, I kind of know the story that I would tell, and it's one that would stand on its own. It wouldn't necessarily be a direct follow-on from Harrow Lake, but it would be in that same setting and a lot of familiar elements to it, but a very different story. So yeah, I could dip my toe back into those waters. But
Oh, that'd be so exciting. That would definitely, I mean, just to let you know, I do have a soft spot for Carter and Cora as well. So, you know, if you throw them in, it's like you're
well, I have to say that Cora is probably my favorite character. So I think if I was given free reign, you know, write whatever you want, you know, go back to Harrow Lake and write the sequel and do whatever you want with it. I think probably she would be the main character.
Oh,
So,
definitely. She was brilliant. She was a right little firecracker from the start. I adored her. And it's funny because like with horror, I feel like a lot of people consider it like a niche genre, but it's like I've noticed over the years there's kind of been a rise in this trend of like there's more horror films, more horror books coming out. Why do you think there's kind of been this rise in popularity for horror?
I think it's pretty much, it's like any genre that people can get really passionate about. It goes through trends and it'll come and go. So like in the 80s and 90s, you had big horror film trends coming through then, and books as well, like the point horror books that I used to read when I was growing up, Christopher Pike, other authors like that. They were everywhere when I was a teenager, and I think they disappeared for a while, or certainly horror as it was being presented in films and in books, it changed slightly. It wasn't the big monster horror that we'd sort of grown used to in the 80s and 90s, and it was coming back in with a little bit more, especially after like Blair Witch and things like that. It got slightly different, maybe all the found footage type films like Sinister and things like that. Yeah, so I think it goes through waves, so it comes and goes as people naturally you sort of take all the horror in, and then you feel like you need something else for a little while. So I think it's just been through that phase, and now everybody's ready for more horror.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's one where it's like, oh, it's brilliant, because it's one where you watch it and you kind of like, you're going to be terrified, but it's almost kind of like an addiction in a way. It's like you just get so tuned in. It's like you've got to see it to the end because you've got to know how it ends and all that. It's almost like an addiction in a way when you're watching horror.
I know. I think you have to be a certain type of person to want to watch or read horror. You either go into it to prove that you can't be scared, or you go into it wanting to be scared and enjoying that experience. And I think, if you're that type of person, you're the same sort of person who likes going on roller coasters because you like that adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I can sort of see certain personality traits of people who do enjoy reading and watching horror.
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's so many elements as well that go into horror. Is there anything particular that you find challenging about writing for this genre in particular?
I think there's always a danger of retreading too much old ground. A lot of the things that scare people are quite common. Everybody pretty much has or will identify with the fear of spiders and things like that. You'll have a phobia. Maybe it's not spiders, but something else that means that you can relate to, scares of that nature. So I think it's sometimes difficult to try and tap into something that is a new idea that will scare people universally. And it's, you won't scare everyone, I guess, but you've got to try.
I suppose it's one of those where it's kind of like you want that originality, but as well you don't want to stray too far from what's kind of the norm as well. So it's kind of like that delicate balance between the two in a way.
Yeah, I liked playing around with some of the quite traditional horror tropes, like the final girl trope and things like that. So having, Lola face off against the monster, but also be quite sort of in a meta way, having grown up around a horror movie director and all of his works, she knows all of the tropes in horror, and she knows, this is the point where the girl should run but never does, and Lola's like, well, I'm gonna run.
Oh my gosh, yes, that was brilliant. It was literally, it's like you were taking these beloved tropes almost and then just flipping them on their head almost, and it was brilliant. It was just like, you've got that familiarity, but it's so fresh in how it's executed. It was so good. But yes, I mean, gotta move on since it is Libraries Week. How was your relationship with the library kind of influenced your career as a writer, but also as a reader as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously I was a reader first, so I grew up going every single weekend to the library to check out books, and working my way through the Point Horror collection that they had there was a big part of my youth. It was always something that I looked forward to, and seeing all the new books coming in and the activities going on, there was always, the library was always a good place to go and spend some time. And as an adult, I've continued to do that. And obviously, my love of reading has been a massive part of why I now write books. I don't think anybody ever writes books if they're not, a big reader. So yeah, libraries are massively important, and I'm real happy to champion them.
Well, that's the thing, because I feel like a lot of people don't actually know a lot of the other functions that libraries offers. So for you, if you were to pitch a reason why your readers should join the library, what would be your main reason really to get them to sign up?
Well, having access to all sorts of resources. I mean, nowadays it's not just physically going into the library, which is obviously a bit difficult at the moment, what with the plague.
Oh, yes.
But having all these online resources that you can get through your library as well. You can check out books and audiobooks and things like that online. You have under ordinary circumstances events and things going on in the library. Your one-stop shop, so you can go in there and pay bills and council tax and all sorts of things going on there. So yeah, it's a hub for the community, and it really brings people together. In better times, it does.
Brilliant answer. I love that, definitely. And the theme for Libraries Week this year is on that emphasis of reading itself. So to someone that's new to the horror genre, what would be your beginner's guide recommendations to those wanting to check some horror books out?
Well, definitely, dip your toe in, see which stories grab you. And there's plenty of horror stories out there at the moment. I mean, especially ones which veer from, just over the point of thriller into, real horror. I would say that there's a book called Good Girls Die First that's just come out by Catherine Foxfield that's about this abandoned pier and a group of 10 kids who get stranded on it, and one by one they get picked off by some sinister creature. Or also Anything by Dawn Kurtagich, who's also a North Wales author, and she writes horror. She wrote a book, most recent one was called Teeth in the Mist, which draws on the legend of Faust, and it's set in the Welsh hills, and it's incredibly creepy and gothic and amazing. So yeah, I think they're two real good ones to start off with.
They actually sound brilliant. I'm just going to go add them to my list now. What were some of your go-tos, those books that you just always seem to gravitate towards, even like if it's on a bad day or just for nostalgia purposes? Do you have kind of like those books that you always just gravitate back to that are just such a staple to your life?
I'm really not good at rereading books, which is another reason why going to the library is so good for me, because I don't have to keep them all. But I don't tend to reread a lot, but some that I do tend to go back to are graphic novels. I find that you read them so quickly, you can go back and just appreciate other things that you maybe didn't notice the first time. I'm reading one at the moment that's a really good horror graphic novel. It's called Uzumaki. Ooh. It's about a town that becomes infected by spirals, and it starts to send people a little bit strange. I'm about 100 pages into it, and it's really, really good. I mean, the illustrations in it are amazing as well. Other books that I like to go back to, like Through the Woods is another graphic novel that I loved. And Thornhill by Pam Smyth, which is, it's a combination really of a graphic novel and a novel. It's really sort of dark and sinister about a house that's maybe haunted. It's really good anyway.
That's brilliant, because I think with the graphic novel as well, is like I think people there's a bit of a misconception there. So it's nice really, because you can appreciate the art and the ambience and all that, but it's also, it's to a lot of people, it still counts as reading. It's and especially if you've strapped for time and stuff like that, I think a graphic novel is just like, it's the brilliant book to kind of pick up, really.
Absolutely. And I have to say that I've only, gotten into graphic novels in the last, say, 3 years. But yeah, I find that when I need inspiration to write, the best thing for me is not to go and read somebody else's writing, because you might end up sort of becoming sort of slightly a mimic of what you're reading. I find it's best to go and read a graphic novel. I find a lot of inspiration in looking at, the artwork in it. I find I get a lot of story ideas doing that.
That is brilliant. I mean, one thing that you picked up on is Harrow Lake is kind of marketed as a young adult novel. Is there a particular reason why you chose to write for that age group?
Well, mostly I love reading young adult books. I think, your main characters are generally 16, 17, 18 years old. And I think that's such an exciting time in a person's life anyway. It's a point where, you're making big decisions that are going to affect the rest of your life, and big changes. You might be finishing school, moving out on your own for the first time. And I think it's always because it's, sort of a time of turmoil anyway. I think if you're going to write a book about somebody who goes through, the end of the world or is attacked by monsters, just throw it at them when they're going through the worst time of their life anyway.
That is brilliant.
Why not?
Why not? Exactly. I mean, I think that's, again, because even as adults can enjoy young adult, just because, we were all 16 at one point, we can relate to those feelings. And I think there's a lot of unpredictability as well with that young adults. It's like you never quite know what's going to be thrown at them next. It's a brilliant age group to write for, I think. And I'm sure a lot of your readers themselves are young adults. I'm sure a lot of them are actually considering as well. It's like, well, I love writing myself, but how do I go about making a career out of it? So what would your advice be to those aspiring young writers?
Writing, especially writing full time, is hard to get into. It's taken me a number of years before I got to the point where, you know, I was even making any money doing it. But that isn't to put anybody off it, because if you're passionate about telling stories, writing and seeing, you know, your name on the front cover of a book, as you've got behind you there, my name on the front cover of several copies, it's just the most amazing feeling. And I think if you're passionate about something, you need to really give it your best shot. So read as much as you can, write as much as you can, be willing to take feedback and criticism, because, you know, it's all going to help make you a better writer, and then just keep at it, basically. If you can find a job that you love that fits in nicely with writing as well, you know, a lot of writers are also teachers and things like that. If you can find something that goes hand in hand with it quite nicely, then that is perfect. You've got the best of both worlds and much less pressure to try and make money out of the thing that you enjoy so much.
Yeah, I think that's like the key thing for me. I've always picked up on is that you've got to be passionate about writing, especially when you've got a project that's so dear to you. It's when I feel like it gives you that motivation and that energy to kind of see it through and be like, right, I've got this brilliant idea, let's just bring it to life, sort of thing. I think passion really is like that key for me, what I find. But say about like with writer's block, say you've got this brilliant idea that you kind of know how you want it to turn out, but you kind of just reach that point in the novel where you just don't know where to go. It's like, how do you deal with that writer's block in a way?
Yeah, I do get that quite a bit. I especially have with the book that I've just finished writing. I find you need to take a little break away from it. If you've hit a wall with your story, you know, sat down and stared at it for as long as you can without actually writing any of it, take a break. It's the only thing I find that will kickstart, you know, the writing gears again. Go out and have a walk, listen to an audiobook, just do something completely different for a couple of hours, and it tends to reset a little bit and gives your brain time to recover.
Oh, definitely. I mean, again, as well, because like, you know, you're a full-time writer. So what are your kind of go-to hobbies that kind of help you kind of just relax and just kind of give you that little break from the writing and the reading and all that?
Yeah, I love going out exploring. I mean, in North Wales, you've got so much just on your doorstep that you can go out and have a look at. Old cemeteries, ruined castles. You can go and have a walk in the woods, especially at the moment. You know, you've got all these toadstools and things coming out, you know, interesting things to go and take a look at. But I like taking pictures of things as well. I post a load of stuff on Instagram. But yeah, I love going looking at historical places, and, you know, it does tend to give me writing ideas as well.
This is brilliant, yeah, because like your other passions or like they just feed into your job in a way, which is brilliant. It's kind of like a win-win scenario.
Exactly.
Brilliant. Well, one question I do want to ask, and I think because there's a lot of adaptations, especially with the young adult books these days, like Netflix is picking up a bunch of them. So for you, if Harrow Lake was ever to be optioned for a TV or film, who would be your dream cast?
Ooh. Well, for the main character, I mean, she's, you know, 17-year-old girl. Somebody like Millie Bobby Brown, who was in Stranger Things, and she's just been in the Enola Holmes film on Netflix. I think she would be amazing.
Definitely.
And yeah, because, I mean, she could also play Lorelai, the mother, because the mother, as she appears in the story, is around the same age as Lola. Nolan, I think, being, you know, this very brash and outspoken Hollywood film director, somebody maybe like Nicolas Cage or Josh Brolin, you know, somebody with a real like forceful personality that could really, you know, bring that out on the screen would be amazing.
That would actually be brilliant. I would eat that up in a heartbeat. I would love that. And then basically we have had some questions come in from our social media users. We've got actually quite a bit, so I'm going to run through with a couple of them for you now. Great. And then one person, Becky, asks, what's your ideal writing space?
I have a writing room. I'm not actually sitting in it at the moment. I'm sitting on the floor in my lounge. But I have a writing room that has a nice little stack of books next to me and a desk. I didn't have a desk for so long. I just used to sit with my laptop on my lap and getting, you know, a slightly S-shaped spine from it. So yeah, I've got my own desk now. I need to have all bookish things around me and some creepy things as well, just to give me a little bit of inspiration as I'm writing.
Nice. Do you find it easy to write when you're listening to music, or do you find that the music's actually quite a deterrent?
I can't really write when I'm listening to anything that has lyrics. I find that I'm too busy listening to the words. I do listen to music when I'm editing. I find that if especially when I'm revising a story to maybe layer in extra detail in the world building, the atmosphere and the character, if I want a piece of music to give me a certain feeling, I find that helps with the editing process.
Brilliant, that's really interesting. And then another user is asking if any of your characters are based on people you've met in real life.
I wouldn't dare say that they were.
We get you into trouble, that.
I mean, most of the people in Harrow Lake are quite horrible, so I couldn't say that they were based on anybody real. No, I think Nolan is the only person who is sort of vaguely based on just like the stereotypical Hollywood big brash personality. So yeah, he's the only one that sort of has any bearing on, you know, maybe an amalgamation of a few people, but nobody else, no.
And they were also wondering as well, it's like, because you've written quite a lot of young adult books, but would you ever consider branching out and writing an adult or even a children's book? Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, I had to go at writing for younger age groups, so like a middle grade. It was a horror as well. It wasn't very good. So I don't think I'll go that way again. I, you know, never say never, but maybe adult I might write for. I quite fancy the idea of writing for an adult market, but maybe not in horror.
Ooh,
maybe a different genre.
Oh, that'd be well interesting. I'd love to read that, basically. And because this world has gone a bit mad and we're living in a very crazy, uncertain time. So have you found that the pandemic has impacted your writing in any way?
Well, I was on a deadline for the majority of lockdown. So I was basically going to be tied to my desk anyway during that time. And it didn't really change that much until quite recently. And I've realized, you know, I've just handed in a new book and thought, yes, I can go out again. And no, actually, I can't go and do anything. So yeah, I mean, it changes things. And it was hard sometimes to feel motivated to write. You know, everything gets a little bit, you know, you're stuck in the same four walls all the time and can't really go and do anything. It's not the most motivating, but yeah, doing all right.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that, glad to hear. And then, oh, I like this question. So we've got one come in that says, is there anyone you'd love to work with if you had the opportunity to?
Do you mean to write a book together with somebody?
To write a book or even just screenplays or anything in general?
Well, there are lots and lots of authors who I admire. I'm not sure I could ever co-write a book unless it was something that was going to be like out of my wheelhouse. So then I'd feel okay about handing over a bit of control. But if there were ever going to be like a film adaptation of Harrow Lake, a director I would love to work with is Jennifer Kent, and she directed the film The Babadook.
Oh, yes.
And she wrote it as well, and yeah, she would be amazing to work with, I think.
That would be an absolutely brilliant team up there. It'd be such a dominant team. I'd love it. It'd be brilliant. Yeah, sign me up for that, definitely. And then we've got one final question from one of our viewers. If you had to live in any novel or fictional town, where would you live?
Wow, a fictional town. Twin Peaks would definitely be interesting for a weekend. I'm not sure I'd live there, but I'd definitely like to go and have a look around.
Yeah, I get freaked out by that, to be honest, with the Killer Bob and all that. I don't think I'd cope in Twin Peaks.
Oh. Where else? Well, I mean, Derry, the town from It.
Yes.
I mean, you'd have to go and, you know, have a look around there when it wasn't one of the 27th years when the clown comes out, maybe.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I don't know if I could cope with living in that town, to be honest. I think I'd be too
No.
scared.
Stay away from the storm drains.
So we're just going to wind down a bit. We're going to finish with some nice little this or that questions, just to kind of some shot in the dark. So the first one, nice and easy, cats or dogs?
Cats.
Nice, I agree with you there. Physical books or ebooks?
Physical. I do love ebooks though.
Yeah, so if you had to choose between physical books and an audiobook, which one would it be?
It's hard, but I'd still go physical.
No, same, to be honest. It's one. I feel like audiobooks are great for non-fiction for me.
Yes, yeah.
And then, are you an early bird or a night owl?
Night owl, definitely. I am terrible in the morning.
Oh, and do you prefer the smell of old books or new books?
New books.
Cabin in the woods or an island paradise?
Oh, well, at the moment, I'd go for an island paradise.
Soak up a bit of that sun.
It's cold.
And tea or coffee?
Coffee, always.
No.
Hate tea.
Oh, what? Oh, I can't live without my tea, to be honest. And Christmas or Halloween?
Halloween.
Nice.
Definitely.
Do you have any Halloween traditions?
I put up a lot of decorations. This year I've bought a special doorbell, and it's the scariest thing you've ever seen in your life. It's like a scary face, and when you press the doorbell, a snake comes out at your finger. And yeah, I'm going to terrify the local kids. So that's probably the start of a new tradition.
To be fair, it's like they'll never forget that moment, though.
They'll never come back either.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's been brilliant. I've loved this chat, and I love Harrow Lake. And but before you go, one last question. Could you give us a possible idea of any upcoming projects you're working on?
Sure. I've, like I said, just handed in a new book, and this will hopefully be out next summer-ish. It's not quite as scary as Harrow Lake, but it's still a thriller, and there's plenty of murder in this one. So yay!
Sounds like your standard Hearts and Flowers novel.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this chat, and I hope you did too.
Thank you,
And
Lois.
I can't wait to read more of your books, and we'll be sure to keep them in stock at the library for you.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Oh, thank you so much again. Absolutely loved it. And yeah, good luck with all the other projects.
Thank you very much. Bye for now.
Bye.